Imagine stepping into a world 200 years ago where the familiar meets the downright bizarre. The 1820s, a time of scientific curiosity, bold ideas, and some practices so strange they sound like they belong in a fantasy novel. But these were real, believed by doctors, scientists, and everyday folks. Buckle up, because we're diving into a wild historical ride through beliefs and practices that will leave you stunned, amused, and maybe a little grossed out. Number 1. Let's start with something we all take for granted today: washing our hands. Picture this. You're in a hospital in 1825. Doctors are rushing from patient to patient, their hands stained from who knows what. Hand washing? That was considered more of a quirky ritual than a medical necessity. Hospitals back then were often death traps, where infections spread like wildfire. Doctors might perform an autopsy and then deliver a baby without so much as a rinse. It wasn't until a Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis in the 1840s connected dirty hands to deadly infections in Vienna's maternity wards. His solution? Soap and water. The result? Lives saved. But here's the kicker. His colleagues mocked him, refusing to believe they could be the problem. Poor Semmelweis faced resistance so fierce he ended up in a mental institution. Moral of the story? Clean hands save lives, but convincing people of that was a battle. Number 2. Now let's talk about graham crackers, those crunchy treats you love with s'mores. Their origin story is anything but indulgent. Meet Sylvester Graham, a 19th century preacher with a mission to save your soul through diet. Graham was part of the temperance movement, railing against alcohol, meat, spices, and even comfy mattresses, basically anything fun. He believed indulgence led to sin and sickness. His solution? The Graham diet, a bland regimen of fruits, veggies, and whole grains. Enter the graham cracker. Debuted in 1829, designed to be so boring it wouldn't tempt you into naughty thoughts. No sugar, no fat, no flavor. But here's the twist. Graham never patented it. By 1898, Nabisco turned his pious cracker into the sweet treat we know today. Bet Graham would have had a fit over that. Number 3. In the 1820s, phrenology was commonly practiced. It is a pseudoscience that claimed the shape of your head revealed your intelligence, personality, even your destiny. Picture a phrenologist running their hands over your skull, declaring, "This bump means you're destined for greatness." It sounds absurd now, but back then it was a high-class intellectual pursuit. The Edinburgh Phrenological Society, founded in 1820, spread the craze, and in America, lecturers drew crowds eager to have their heads read. The idea was that different brain regions controlled specific traits, and a bigger region meant a bigger bump on your skull. But here's the dark side. Phrenology was often used to justify prejudice, claiming certain groups were inferior based on head shape. By the 1840s, it fell out of favor, but its legacy lingered, reminding us how dangerous bad science can be. Number 4. If you were feeling under the weather in the 1820s, your doctor might reach for a knife or a jar of wriggling leeches. Bloodletting, an ancient practice rooted in the idea of balancing the body's humors, was the go-to cure for everything from fevers to headaches. The logic? Too much blood? Drain it. Leeches were especially popular. London's St. Thomas's Hospital used 50,000 of them in 1822 alone. Doctors even used tubes to guide leeches to specific spots. It sounds gruesome, but it was so common that even George Washington, America's first president, was bled during his final illness in 1799. Bloodletting faded by the late 19th century, but it's a wild reminder of how far medicine has come. Number 5. Now, let's venture to the edges of the earth, literally. In the 1820s, a man named John Cleves Sims Jr. had a bold idea. The Earth was hollow, with giant entrances at the North and South poles, leading to a hidden world inside. These Sims holes captured the public's imagination, even if scientists rolled their eyes. Sims toured America, lecturing about his theory, and even won over a few fans, including former President John Quincy Adams. He dreamed of a polar expedition to prove it, but never got the funding. When he died in 1829, his son honored him with a monument topped by a hollow globe. Today, we know the Earth is solid, but back then, this idea sparked wonder and debate. Number 6. For women in the 1820s, seeking medical help could be a nightmare. Hysteria was a catch-all diagnosis blamed on a wandering uterus. Ancient Greeks thought the uterus could float around, causing everything from anxiety to fainting. By the 19th century, doctors still used hysteria to explain any female health issue, often barring women from jobs or social roles because they were deemed too emotional. Treatments ranged from strange, smelling salts to scare the uterus back into place, to downright patronizing. Shockingly, hysteria stayed in medical books until the 1980s, a stark reminder of how gender bias shaped medicine. Number 7. In the 1820s, mesmerism was the hot new thing. Dr. Franz Mesmer claimed humans were full of magnetic fluid that could be manipulated to cure ailments. His sessions, often with wealthy women, were part medical, part mystical theater, with patients swooning or convulsing. Critics called it quackery, but its allure spread, reaching America by the late 1820s. Mesmerism laid the groundwork for modern hypnotism, proving that even wild ideas can spark real change. Number 8. Picture this. Scientists in the 1820s zapping dead frogs with electricity, watching their legs twitch as if alive. This was Galvanism, inspired by Luigi Galvani's experiments. Some wondered if electricity could bring the dead back to life, but, of course, it couldn't. But these experiments, which inspired Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, led to breakthroughs in understanding electromagnetism, thanks to Hans Christian Ørsted's 1820 discovery. Science fiction met science fact, sparking a new era of discovery. Number 9. Picture a bustling Stone Age village 34,000 years ago. Families are meeting, not for love or romance, but to strike a deal. Marriage back then wasn't about candlelit dinners. It was a survival strategy. Researchers from the universities of Cambridge and Copenhagen, studying ancient Russian remains, suggest that early marriages were arranged to avoid inbreeding, ensuring healthier communities. Fast forward to the 19th and early 20th centuries, and arranged marriages were still the norm across many cultures. For most of history, marriage was less about love and more about producing heirs or sealing alliances. In some societies, polygamy or systems of concubines were standard, with men building legacies through strategic unions. Parents called the shots, often pairing young brides and grooms, sometimes shockingly young. In 1920s America, U.S. Census records show nearly 12% of girls aged 15 to 19 were married, a number that's dropped to about 6% today per the CDC. These unions shaped families and societies, but they often left little room for choice or romance. Imagine being a teenager, told your future was decided by your dad's handshake. Wild, right? Number 10. Now, let's step into a darker corner of history. The town square. where a crowd gathers, buzzing with anticipation. It's the early 1900s, and public executions are the main event. Back then, death was no stranger. Disease, infant mortality, and even dead animals in the streets were part of daily life. So perhaps it's no surprise that justice was served with a side of spectacle. In the U.S., around 15,000 people were executed over its history, often in front of massive crowds. The last public execution, in 1936 Kentucky, drew up to 20,000 spectators, partly because the sheriff overseeing it was a woman, an unheard-of role at the time. Headlines like "Ghostly Carnival Proceeds Hanging" from Evansville, Indiana, turned the event into a media frenzy, pushing lawmakers to ban public executions. These grim gatherings remind us how justice could become a public stage for cruelty, a stark contrast to today's private legal processes. Number 11. Finally, let's visit a bustling 1900s city where the sound of clanging machinery mixes with the chatter of tiny voices. Children, some as young as 5, are hard at work. For centuries, kids were seen as future laborers and family support systems. By the early 20th century, as cities grew and industries boomed, child labor was everywhere. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics notes that kids toiled in fields, mines, and factories, doing everything from shucking oysters to weaving textiles to rolling cigars. In rural areas, they hauled coal or fished along coasts. In cities, they darted through streets as newsies, couriers, or cleaners. Imagine a child, barely tall enough to reach a machine, working 12-hour shifts in a smoky mill. It wasn't until the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 that the U.S. began regulating child labor, setting minimum ages and safer conditions. But back then, childhood often meant sweat and sacrifice, a far cry from the playgrounds and classrooms we associate with kids today. The 1800s were a time of wonder, weirdness, and wild ideas. From leeches to hollow earth, these strange practices remind us how far we've come, and how curiosity, even when it leads to dead ends, drives progress. Which of these bizarre beliefs surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more wild dives into history. Until next time, stay curious.